just a while. But for now, let's take it across to Roopa Kudva, who's Managing Director and CEO at Crisil, who now joins us on the show live from Crisil's headquarters here in Mumbai. Roopa, to begin with, you're celebrating your Silver Jubilee this year. Would you say that in these last 25 years, the credit ratings industry has matured to the extent that you'd have liked to see it?
Well, I think the industry has come a very long way. I think a few tremendous value additions to the Indian markets. First of all, I think just purely increasing transparency in the system. If you look at it today, CRISIL alone has ratings on about 11,000 companies. We just had ratings on about 450 companies 4 years ago. From that, we've gone to 11,000 companies. Other rating agencies rate another 11,000 companies. So you have an industry today which is making information, ratings, detailed analysis available on 20,000 firms. That makes it one of the largest industries in the world today. So in terms of sheer availability of information, transparency in the system, I think that's tremendous. Secondly, I think ratings provide independent benchmarks which help lenders and markets to price risk. So that's the second important thing. Third thing I think the rating industry has enabled is improved access to funding for corporates. So whether it is increasing the confidence of banks to lend to companies, or whether it is bringing an unknown or hitherto unknown companies to the markets, I think all of that the rating industry has enabled. And finally, I would also say that because ratings are public, because ratings are subject to surveillance on a continuous basis, I think the ratings industry has played a role in improving financial discipline in corporate India, because if you delay on a payment, the rating gets downgraded. So I think the whole concept of improving financial discipline because you have ratings in the public domain has contributed to strengthening the credit culture in India. And finally, I would like to put in a word about regulations. Unlike the rest of the world, where regulations for rating agencies are a relatively recent phenomenon, India has had regulations for rating agencies going way back to 1999, one of the first countries in the world, which I think have played a big role in making sure that the industry maintains certain standards and has achieved a certain level of credibility.
But also, Roopa, the book that you released yesterday evening, the Crisil story, what was the thinking? Should one view it as an attempt by your company to exonerate itself of all that has gone wrong for the ratings industry post the global financial crisis?
Well, I think the book is something that started off as, there were these young authors, Hemant Gurur and Sumit Chaudhary, and we began talking to them essentially about chronicling our 25-year journey for the benefit of our young employees, because we have a lot of people who have been with the firm for less than 3 years. And as you know, CRISIL over the last 25 years has gone well beyond being a rating agency to being a global analytics firm. Today, half our revenues come from outside of India, so on and so forth. So the whole idea was really to document our story for our employees. When they were done with it, because they conducted about 60 interviews with leading people in corporate India, leading customers outside of India and all of that, everyone felt they'd come out with a story which would be of wider interest. So I think it's a story of a company and an evolution of the firm. It's a story of a journey of India over the last 25 years, much more than about ratings or ratings industry in particular. It does talk about the values. It does talk about our allegiance to analytical rigor above all else. But I think it goes beyond. It's not a story about a rating agency or rating policies or trying to defend what rating agencies have done.
Roopa, afternoon. If we focus on the broader economy, we've seen a slew of reform announcements in recent weeks. Now, do you believe the change in sentiment itself is beginning to spur investment decisions by corporates?
There is no doubt that the slew of recent announcements has resulted in an improvement in sentiment. But even if you look beyond the sentiment, I would very certainly say that we are at or very near the bottom. And I think it is our belief that the worst is there. We are at the worst, or the worst is just behind us. And why do I say this? I think for a few very good reasons. Very clearly, the pressures on GDP growth have abated. While this year we will do 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, I think next year our forecast is that GDP growth will go up to 6.7%. I think we are forecasting a normal monsoon. We are looking at industry picking up over last year's growth rates, and that is going to account for an increase in GDP growth next year. Secondly, if you look at corporate profitability and look at the results that have come in, you have already seen in the last quarter that the EBITDA margins, after falling for 8 or 9 quarters in a row, have started to improve. That's because commodity prices came off their peaks, certain industries benefited from a weaker currency, and so on. Thirdly, if you look at our upgrades and downgrades, clearly, so far this year, downgrades are still higher than upgrades. We expect that trend to continue for the next 6 months or so. But the intensity and pace of downgrades, we believe, is going to go down going forward. And finally, I think interest rates have clearly peaked. They will only go down from this level, as the indications are all saying so. And we believe that has very positive implications for companies in terms of reducing their interest costs, in terms of increasing their incentive to invest in new projects, and also very positive from a consumer perspective, because makes loans more affordable and can spur private consumption also. So beyond the sentiment, I think there are some very real factors that we are seeing, which leads us to believe that things are going to get better from now on.
Right. Also, Roopa, in this India versus Bharat story, would you say that consumption growth today is in good part being driven by rural India, and that this is a trend that's expected to continue for the foreseeable future at least?
There is no doubt that rural India is going to be a big driver of growth in the years to come. CRISIL has recently published a very interesting analysis where we've talked about the fact that for the first time in the post-liberalization era, we have seen a situation where the growth in rural consumption has been higher than the growth in urban consumption in absolute rupee terms. Why has this happened? I think this has happened primarily because of the significant growth in non-farm income in rural areas, whether it be through schemes like the NREGA or whether it be through jobs or work in non-farm related areas increasing. So therefore, the rural consumer has more money in her hands. Also, I think if you look at the construction workers, there's been a lot of construction activity in India in the last few years, and the construction workers who work in the urban areas actually remit about 70% of their earnings back to their families in the rural areas. So all of that is really driving a big rural consumption boom. Even in the relatively backward states like Jharkhand, Bihar, etc., 1 in 3 rural families owns a mobile phone, as opposed to 1 in 2 rural families in the rest of the country. If you look at things like motorcycle penetration, for example, significantly gone up in many states in rural India, and it's actually ahead of motorcycle penetration in some of the urban areas in the country. So I think clearly rural is going to be a big growth driver for consumption in the years to come.
Roopa, just going to dwell on the point that you brought about that corporate downgrades are likely to continue over the next 6 months. In light of this, which are the sectors that you'd be particularly concerned about?
If you look at our downgrades, they are pretty much for reasons relating to liquidity and debt levels in individual companies as opposed to specific sectors. So you don't see any particular sectoral concentration in the downgrades. However, yes, there are certain sectors where we are seeing greater signs of stress compared to others. These are pretty well known. So whether it be airlines, whether it be commercial real estate, textiles, shipping, for example, these power sector, although do have a package now that seeks to address some of the critical issues in the power sector, these are the sectors that are more stressed on a relative basis.
Right, Roopa Kudva, thanks very much for joining us on the show. I'm afraid we've run completely out of time, but thanks very much for joining us and talking to us about the outlook for the Indian economy and talking to us about the distance that the ratings industry has traveled these last 25 years.